Hello and welcome once again to the Fit Family Foundation's podcast. I am your host, Victor Fernandez. Thank you once again for joining me as you do each and every week. I truly appreciate it. Now, I have a story to share with you. It's one of those I live to tell the tale type stories. A little over a week ago, I completed my first ever half marathon, 13.1 miles of running to varying degrees, I might add. Sometimes it was sloshing, sometimes it was jogging, sometimes it may have been skipping. As one of my friends, Erica, mentioned when she went for a run recently, that she was galumphing. I'd never heard that phrase before, but it certainly applies to some of what I did during those 13.1 miles, especially latter half of that race, because it was tough, and galumphing was about as the best I could get out of myself down the stretch, that's for sure. I'm going to begin by saying I really didn't train a whole lot for it. And it wasn't because I was trying to be lazy. It was simply because I wanted to see where I was at. I took a similar approach with earlier 5K I ran just before Christmas, and then a 10K that I ran a couple of weeks prior to this half marathon. And I really didn't train a whole lot for either of those races either, because I wanted to set a baseline, so to speak. I wanted to see where I was. I used to be a much more avid runner than I had been the past several years or so. And I'm starting to slowly get back into it. And I wanted to see where I was in comparison to where I was back then. And I figured there was going to be some semblance of a sizable gap between the times I was running and the races I was running and how I felt during those races back then than I do now. But I wanted to kind of set some numbers to it, because what can be measured can be improved. So I went out there and ran it. And sure enough, the first half of the race went a heck of a lot better than the latter half. I went back and looked at my numbers just the other day, as a matter of fact, and I finished in, I'm trying to remember off the top of my head, it was 241:36.8. Yeah, I think that's what it was. But the interesting aspect of it wasn't necessarily the finishing time, but rather my mile splits, first half of the race compared to the second half. And that was 11:11, if I remember correctly, for the first 6.5 miles, and then over 12 minutes, so over a minute difference for the latter half of the race. No surprise, I might add, because to be honest, I thought my splits were even worse than 12 plus minutes that last 6.5 miles or so. So the reason I shared that with you, I didn't want to get all numbery on you or anything like that, but I wanted to share that with you because I wanted to kind of delve into the thoughts that were going through my mind, especially the latter half of that race. Early on, I felt pretty good. It was actually, I had an interesting kind of sidebar story to share that, my wife, God bless her soul, Shelly, she got up at 5 a.m. with me, drove me downtown so I could park my car near the finish line. She drove me out about a half hour to where the start line was, and we got about a mile from the start line. And the traffic was so bad that at that point, we just decided I needed to get out of the car and run to the start line. So that'll be my warm up, so to speak, which was about a mile or slightly over a mile. And I wasn't alone in that regard. I definitely, it was a sort of a Forrest Gump moment, for me and some other runners that I joined with, because it just seemed like as we were getting closer to the start line, and we were running past, cars that were at a standstill, they all of a sudden more and more people hopped out of their cars and followed suit. Next thing you know, we were a rather sizable group of people that were just trying to get to the start line to run the race. So that's a pretty, I guess, humorous sidebar. At least I can find it humorous now. Maybe not so much morning of the race. But so I was already warmed up. I felt pretty good. I was excited, certainly nervous. I'd never run a race that long before. The longest I'd ever done at any given time was a couple of 10-mile OCR, obstacle course races, a few years back when I lived up in Erie, PA. And the difference with those was that the runs were broken up, because as you got to each obstacle, and you were in a line waiting to go over or through or under the obstacle, you had time to kind of collect your thoughts, catch your breath. Whereas in any race, you're just running. You can stop, but it doesn't behoove you to stop. You want to keep going so you can finish the race. So I'm feeling pretty good early part of the race. The weather's pretty good. I mean, it's upper 40s, low 50s, and light rain, nothing major. And I'm just plugging along pretty good, felt pretty good. I was sticking with the group that I was in, which was still towards the back of the pack, but people weren't just running away from me, easily, which I felt good about. Then I got to the midway point of the race, and this is the part I really want to emphasize. That's when the thoughts started entering my mind. Those what we like to call in the health and fitness world, self-limiting beliefs. Those thoughts that creep into your mind when you're scared of something, when you're overwhelmed by something, when you're frazzled, all those challenging mindsets, frames of mind that lend itself to people convincing themselves not to do something or quitting or not doing anything at all. And that used to be me in some way, shape, or form for many years, where I would get an idea in my head, I would be excited about it. And then the more and more I thought about it and had it run through my mind, the more I became, I call it paralysis by analysis. The more I became paralyzed in fear of doing that, whatever that was, for fear of failure, for fear of not doing it as well as I had envisioned it in my head. So I wouldn't do it. I'd quit before I even start. And those types of thoughts started crossing my mind. I won't lie. You know me, I'm always transparent on this show. I'm always transparent, period. And I joked with somebody the other day that thoughts of, it was a good thing I didn't have my phone on me while I was running that race, because the thoughts of picking up the phone and calling an Uber to come pick me up so I can go get some pizza crossed my mind a couple hundred times. And I can joke about it now, but it's the truth then, because you look at a mile marker and you see, I'm at mile 7, and then you realize, wow, I still have another 6.1 miles to go, and it seems like an absolute eternity. It seems like I was running from Wilmington to Montana, because it just seemed that much further. I'd built it up so much in my mind. And those are the types of thoughts that lead people to quit, that lead people to fall short of not just their expectations, but their potential. I've said this before, and I've posted this on social media before, when I've said you don't truly know if you're prepared for something until you actually do it. That's where imperfect action comes into play, where you just take that first step, whether it's the first step of a race or first step of building a business or first step of accomplishing whatever goal that might be, and then figure it out from there. And one of two things will happen. You'll either succeed, you'll either reach your goal and you win, or you fall short and you learn from it and you win. I never used to think of it that way. I used to think of it as success or failure, and there was nothing in between. And I never believed that you could gain much of anything from failing. But in fact, I've learned in my later adult life that you actually learn more from failing than you do from success, because it doesn't just teach you, okay, this way of doing things didn't work, so I have to find a new way. But it also teaches you more about yourself and who you are, and how you think and how you react and how you respond and what makes you tick. It definitely teaches you more about who you really are. Are you who you say you are, or are you the real deal? Are you the real deal? So those thoughts are crossing my mind as I'm running this race. And I'm struggling. I mean, I won't lie. I am struggling. It took 2 or 3 days after the race was over for my legs to not even fully recover, but to get back to feeling somewhat normal, not feeling like a couple of anchors attached at my hips. And I could have quit at any point in time. The old me would have. Well, I'll be honest with you, the old me wouldn't have run that race to begin with. And I just kept pushing. And I kept, those thoughts cross your mind. It's inevitable. We're human. We're imperfect beings. So those thoughts are going to cross our minds. And it doesn't make us weak. It doesn't mean that we can't accomplish something. It's just the force of average trying to push us in the direction that the force of average wants to push us in. And we can decide to react and respond in one of two ways. You can either give into it, or you can push against it. Or you can continue having those thoughts, but you don't follow through on them. You keep pursuing what you're trying to pursue. And that's what I did. I just kept pushing forward. And with every mile marker that I passed, those limiting beliefs grew quieter and quieter. Those that were reverberating through my head were now tempered down quite a bit. And I kept pushing myself. And when I got to those final 2 miles, mile and a half, mile, half mile, I just kept pushing myself. And I felt even better and better. And at one point specifically, and this was, I want to say about a mile and a half from the finish line, where they funneled, where the race course, they funneled us down 2 different lanes that were barricaded on both sides and in the middle. So there were 2 separate lanes, much like if you were at the DMV or something like that. And to the left was where marathoners continued, and they were going to keep going straight on through downtown to the other side, doing a loop around a local park, Greenfield Park for those of you in Wilmington, and then come back downtown to the finish line, where us half marathoners were going to turn right, go downhill towards the water and onto the boardwalk and proceed down towards the finish line. And that thought, the second I made that right-hand turn, that thought crossed my mind. Imagine having to do what I just did again without stopping. That, and I thought about that, and I said, no, there's just no way. No way I could do that. Based on how exhausted I am right now, I had just started cramping up in my legs. And so it wasn't just pain, it was cramps now. There's no way I could possibly just repeat what I just did and be able to finish. And in looking at it now, maybe I would have finished, maybe not. Same thoughts I had when I first signed up for the half marathon. Maybe I'll finish, maybe I won't. But I won't know unless I actually try. So the more I thought about that, the idea of going from a half marathon to a marathon is a self-limiting belief in and of itself. You're telling yourself you can't do something before you've even tried to do it. I mean, I said half marathon wasn't something that had crossed my mind up until maybe the fall. And I started thinking about, maybe I'll get back into running a little bit. So I ran that 5K just before Christmas and did reasonably well, accomplished my goal, finishing under 30 minutes. I was like, well, let's try the 10K next. Let's go up, the next level. And I ran that I said a couple of weeks ago back in mid-February, and was a little above my goal. I wanted to finish in under an hour. I finished in 1:02 and change, but I still did pretty well. And I'd already signed up for the half marathon way back in the fall. I wanted to get the early bird pricing. I want to hold on to that cash as much as I can. And the more the more the date got closer, those thoughts start crossing your mind, but you push through. Same thing when you get to the start line. Those thoughts might cross your mind initially. I was nervous sitting there waiting to go. And then you get moving and you push through. And you get to that halfway point like I did, and those thoughts cross your mind, and you keep pushing. So why am I saying all this? Let me wrap this up into a nice, tidy little bow. Because it's okay to think that way. It's okay to have those thoughts. I'd be curious to see what it would be like to not have those thoughts cross your mind. I don't know if that's possible. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. But either way, it's okay to have those thoughts cross your mind. It's okay to let them bog you down a little bit. But what's not okay is to give in to them. because you never come out better for that. Never. I know. I did it for many, many years. And it sucks. It's a really crappy feeling to know that you give up on yourself before you even try. That you have so little confidence in yourself that you won't even attempt. That you won't even see what you're made of. You won't even give yourself the opportunity to maybe surprise yourself. So if there's something you want to do, whether it's a half marathon or anything else, I mean, think about the things that I've been able to accomplish over the last few years. And it still blows my mind. But one thing's for sure, I believe enough in myself, and I'm confident enough in myself to know that when I put my mind to it, whether I make 1,000,001 mistakes along the way, or whether things don't turn out quite the way I envision, when I envision them, I'm still getting a heck of a lot further than I would if I didn't try at all. And the same would go for you, everyone. Same would go for you.